Okay, here we go. Hello, and welcome to the late night double feature picture show once again. As always, I'm Al. That's Pete. Hey, Pete.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Pretty good. We had, I don't know, we had like 4 or 5 consecutive days of like gloom. It was like cloudy and rainy and misty and cool. And today, for the first time, it's actually bright and sunny out, so it's kind of nice. Speaking of sunny, we're going to be sharing a bright and sunny film today. Maybe not so much. So our film for the day is The Horror of Party Beach. Pete, I know you watched it early this morning. Before we jump into the plot, what was your reaction to this film generally?
I was I was quite taken aback by this film, to say the least.
So you suffice to say you thought it was really bad.
It's not good. It's not a good movie. Now look, all these B movies are kind of hampered by the same restrictions, right? They have low budgets, they have low production values. The casting is dubious, to say the least. It's usually if it's not cast with real actors, it's cast with people who are actually in the production or are friends of the filmmakers themselves. So you don't have like A-list actors in these movies. But this is well, the movies we've reviewed so far, this was the low point.
Okay, I'm going to save my reaction, I think, to the end. So again, we are talking about The Horror of Party Beach, released in 1964. It is interesting in the fact that it's a horror film that's also kind of a beach party film. If you remember Annette and who was it? Annette and
Annette Funicello, Frankie Valli,
Frankie Valli. They did their beach bingo
Frankie,
movies.
one of those Frankies.
Yeah, this is kind of a combination of a horror film and one of those beach films from the '60s.
Voted
Um,
the worst beach film of all time, I might add.
yeah, yeah. It had a whopping budget of $50,000, which every penny of it is evident on the screen, or maybe not. So, just a little bit about the beginning of the movie. So, when the film starts, we see a young couple driving down the road in a little sports car, top down, uh, and clearly they're on the way to the beach, and they're kind of like being tailed by this motorcycle gang. And right away, we can tell that there's a little bit of trouble in paradise between this couple because Hank, the guy driving the car, and Tina, his girlfriend, Tina is very much trying to draw the attention of the bikers. She's kind of like flirting with them as they drive down the road, and Hank isn't really like all that into it. So when they pull into the parking lot at the beach, Tina and Hank have a bit of a kerfuffle, uh, and it seems like their relationship is on the rocks. Um, so, with that as a background, they go onto the beach, and lo and behold, what's happening? It is Party Beach after all. There's a party going on. There's people on the sand, and they're dancing, and there's a live band playing tunes. Very much 60s, early 60s rock and roll, a little Buddy Holly. As a matter of fact, one of the band members kind of has a Buddy Holly look, guitars with the glasses and the whole thing. Initially, what are your thoughts about that music, Pete, that was playing on the beach?
Yeah, that's actually a real band that they're called the Del Airs, and they were a real band who was recruited to play in the movie. I didn't read anything about how much they may or may not have gotten paid for that role, but yeah, it's classic, 60s, rock and roll, beach party rock and roll, like you'd see in an Elvis movie or something like that.
Yeah, they do have an interesting song. I think it may be the third song that they play while on the beach. It's called Zombie Stomp, which is really interesting because this is 1964. I'm assuming the production might have been in 1963. So this is long before George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, when zombies became like really popular. There were zombies before Romero, but they didn't really become very popular until the Romero film several years later. So, okay, so while this parties going on the beach. People are dancing. The band is playing. Tina and Hank are having a tough time with each other. Tina's flirting away with everybody on the beach. We cut to a ship at sea. Not really at sea. You know, these people are dumping toxic waste really close to land. And when you see how the camera's set up on the ship, like there are homes and businesses like visible everywhere. So basically, these guys are breaking the law, dumping toxic waste into the ocean in plain sight of everybody. So they're dumping these barrels of toxic waste overboard, and you kind of see like really quickly like a miniature barrel. It's you can kind of tell it's been filmed in a fish tank. You see this little miniature barrel like plummeting to the bottom of the
Yeah.
of that, and then they cut to like a real shot of like a barrel hitting sand, and immediately the stopper at the top of the barrel doesn't seem like it was really secured all that much because just hitting the bottom, the stopper pops out, and immediately toxic waste is spilling out of this barrel. And lo and behold, this barrel is dumping toxic waste right next to an old shipwreck, which also happens to have the skeletal remains of a bunch of the sailors who went down with that ship and the toxic waste, and they kind of do it with some like pan editing and some kind of flowing. So they show there's like this dark imagery of like it's supposed to be the toxic waste flowing over the corpses, the skeletal corpses, and then there's some animation that occurs, and you see that these skeletal corpses are becoming something else. What do you think of those particular special effects, Pete?
Yeah, they were pretty horrific, pretty bad. Um, I think they actually you see the little fish swimming around. I think they superimposed the fish over the scenes of the black inky like toxic waste settling over the skeleton, and then you see the first of the creatures begin to mutate out of this dead skeleton, which puzzled me because from everything we know about toxic waste or radioactive waste, it kind of destroys. But in these movies, for some reason, it creates life, and in this case, it kind of uses a dead human skeleton to regenerate into this creature, which was kind of puzzling to me.
Yeah, I think that there's an attempt later in the movie to kind of explain what happened to those corpses. And we could talk about that a little bit down the road. I actually find that that part of the film, to your point, really badly done because they had no budget. But just in terms of like what they were able to do on a limited budget, I actually thought it comes across as cheesy, but pretty good. And I think that makes the scene for me, and there's instances in the movie where this happens. There's this kind of discordant music that plays while this is occurring. So while we're watching this transition occur, the skeleton become the horror. There's kind of like this odd discordant music, and it kind of like between that and the imagery, it's cheesy. It's not really high production value, but it kind of like works for me in a weird way. Okay, so anyway, the creature is now fully fleshed. Its eyes open up. For some reason, creatures have these large mouths with these protuberances that look like a pack of hot dogs were shoved into the creature's mouth. Would you agree with that assessment?
It looks just like a bag of hot dogs sticking out of his face. Yeah.
Yeah, they're just kind of like sticking out of the face there, and I'm thinking, why? Well, why would that be? But anyway, be that as it may, the creature. Now we only see one kind of like get fleshed and become, but there are a bunch of these creatures throughout the film. So I'm assuming there were other dead bodies down there, which were.
Yeah, I think at one point you see as many as 6 of them in one frame. But it's
Yeah,
interesting. It's interesting to note that only 2 of those costumes were made. So the first two that you see have the big creature heads, and then when you see other ones, when there's more than 2 in the scene, the other ones are just kind of covered with leaves, so you can't really see what they look like. But they're just because they only had two costumes, and one of them was too small for an adult, so they had to use a 16-year-old boy um, to play the monster because one of the costumes was too small.
yeah, I seen that also that that I think the son of one of the producer people on the set had to play the one of the creatures because the suit was too small. Yes, and you're right. Those heads, which as you find with low budget films, they're very plastic. The creature can't change expression in any way, shape, or form. So anyway, now that the creatures have been fleshed and they're walking around the bottom of the ocean, we cut back to the beach. We see that Hank's girlfriend Tina, the bikers have now arrived at the beach. She's now having a dance with the lead biker, Hank, who's been down by the water talking to another woman, comes back to see his woman dancing with the leader of the motorcycle gang. Hank, of course, steps in between them and it turns into a fight. Um, Fight's not great choreography for the fight. Matter of fact, the dance scenes on the beach seem a bit more better choreographed than the fight scene. Um, but interestingly, at the end of the fight, the lead biker, goes over and shakes Hank's hand and gives him kind of like a well done, which doesn't seem very bikerly to me in terms of.
I don't think they fleshed that out either. That biker gang could have played a bigger role in the film.
Yeah, yeah, they kind of disappear after that. So anyway, now Tina and Hank have, after the fight is broken up, Tina's trying to kind of make up with Hank. Hank walks away. Tina's upset. She disrobes. She has her bikini on underneath her clothing. She jumps into the water and she swims offshore. And there's this kind of like jetty, this rock jetty sticking out into the ocean. And she swims out there and she's sitting on the jetty, kind of sunning herself, pondering her relationship with Hank. And lo and behold, what should come out of the water behind her, Pete?
Yeah, the creature comes out of the water and climbs up the rocky outcropping, and that's all she wrote for Tina.
Yeah, you kind of you thought the way it was set up that there might be an ongoing Hank Tina story, but she's kind of slaughtered right there. It's a little bit of a bloody scene. They show her like the creature. I think he's supposed to be like tearing her open, but it really looks like he's kind of smearing like stuff on her, and ultimately she dies right there on the rocks. Cut to Hank and the other woman he'd been talking to on the beach, and they're having a conversation, and all of a sudden you hear screaming and everybody runs down to the water. And what you see is Tina. Now her mangled corpse has washed up on shore, and now she's dead. And now the creatures are out there, and God knows what mayhem will occur. We cut to the police, who are like pondering what may have happened to Tina, on a very public beach. And Pete, you indicated in a text message to me there's an odd line that
Yeah,
occurs.
there's a terrible line when the police are trying to figure out what's going on here, and they immediately surmise, and I think the quote is, "Whatever did this could not have come from the land; it must be from the sea." And based on nothing that you see, they jump to this conclusion, and it's just a terrible bit of writing.
Yeah, it's an odd conclusion to jump to, and I had the same feeling when I saw it. So anyway, the police decide that they need the help of a local scientist because evidently this police group didn't have their own specialists who could do this for them. So they take some samples they get from the murder victim to a local scientist who happens to be the father of the girl that Hank was talking to, not Tina, the one who was murdered, but the other woman that Hank, and also happens to be Hank's employer. Hank works with the professor. So they bring this sample to the professor, and the professor is going to do some DNA work, which is interesting for 1963, 1964. You wouldn't think there would have been a lot of stuff that could have been done with DNA back in that day, but they do reference it in the film. So we move forward in time a little bit, and Elaine, who is the professor's daughter, who is now potentially Hank's new love interest, is supposed to go to a slumber party. And by the way, all the girls in this movie, who I think are supposed to be either just out of high school or maybe college age girls, all look like they're 40. They all look like they're 40 years old.
Much older than they're
Yeah.
supposed to be.
So this 40-year-old looking woman is supposed to go to a slumber party, and her father, the professor, says, "Well, did you call the girls and tell them you wouldn't make it?" And she said, "No, with Tina's death, I'm so upset." And basically, her father suggests, "Well, there's no reason to be discourteous."
Yeah, it's exactly what he says. He goes, "Just because you're sad over the death of your friend gives you no right to be discourteous." And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of an odd reaction.
Yeah, because they think the death of your friend actually gives you a lot of reasons to be
Yeah.
discourteous. So anyway, Elaine calls, and we get our view of the girls at the slumber party. And this is typical early 1960s, idealized view. These are girls in their nightgowns, and they're all at the party, and they're preparing. They think that their boys are going to raid their party, and all that stuff. So basically, Tina, sorry, not Tina, Tina's dead. Elaine calls and says, I won't be able to make it to the slumber party, which is fortuitous because Pete, while the girls are waiting for the boys to show up, who actually shows up at the slumber party?
Yeah, creatures show up, they come out of the water, they move right on up to this, I guess the whatever it is, cabin or wherever they're staying, because there's nobody else there but them. And there's like 20 girls in there.
Yeah.
And when the girls say, come on in, the door's open, the creatures bust in and basically slaughter the whole bunch of them, which I was surprised at because you don't usually see that kind of mass murder, slaughter of young girls in a movie from that era.
Yeah, 100%. So just before the creatures get in there, one of the girls indicates that she smells something really bad like dead fish, which obviously are the creatures. But one of the other girls suggests that she hopes that the boys aren't going to throw fish at them again like they did the previous year. And I'm like, this is what passes for fun in your town? Boys raid your slumber party and throw dead fish at you? That's odd. So anyway, the scene. So the girls turn the lights off before the creatures come in because they think it's boys, and they have their own surprise prepared. They have like a pail of water over the door that's supposed to dump on the boys. So it happens in darkness, but I find this scene kind of effective. It's dark. You don't get to see a lot of what's going on. You kind of get some imagery of the creatures, and the girls are being slaughtered, and the girls are all screaming. And again, that discordant music is in the background. So between the kind of like not being quite sure what you're seeing, the girls screaming, you get a sense of the slaughter and there's some blood, and the music, the scene kind of works for me. It's kind of disturbing. Again, not high tech, not clearly shot, but like in its own weird way, it kind of works for me.
Yeah, that is a disturbing scene because so many people are killed in that scene.
Yeah. So anyway, the girl who decided not to go to the party, the professor's daughter, she escapes this terrible death. So now the town knows something's really going on, right? Tina's been killed and found on the beach. These girls have been slaughtered. The creature, we won't go through every one of the kills. The creatures like eventually kill three girls in a car who are passing through. So let me just pause there for a second. This film, so for a beach film, which were normally filmed on the West Coast, this film is an East Coast film. It's actually filmed only about a half hour north of where I currently live in Stamford, Connecticut, of all places.
Yeah, and that's where the director Del Tenney is actually from.
Right. So, and there are a couple of scenes in that movie where it's clearly not summertime. Like when they go, at some point they're going out looking for the creatures, and you got some nature scenes, and there are no leaves on any of the trees.
Right.
So clearly, like I'm not sure when this was shot, but it wasn't summer. Not all the scenes were shot during the summer. So anyway, these three girls are passing through Connecticut on their way to New York City. Somehow they get way lost, and they end up with a flat tire near a quarry. Now, interesting to note that while the first 25 minutes of this movie, in fact, do take place at the beach, the rest of the film doesn't really take place at the beach at all.
Yeah, they kind of abandoned the beach until the very, very end.
Yeah, the creatures somehow move their headquarters to a quarry where there's water. So for the rest of the film, they're kind of leaving the quarry to go out and kill and create mayhem. So anyway, these three girls, one of whom, the driver, see if you agree with me on this, Pete, kind of reminded me of Laverne DeFazio. So if anybody remembers Laverne and Shirley, Laverne being played by Penny Marshall, the driver of the car kind of reminds me of Laverne. So anyway, they're slaughtered. So another indication that that these creatures are out there doing these terrible things. There is a very funny scene where one of the creatures is kind of prowling after two girls, but the two girls, a car pulls up. It's the girl's brother, and they get in the car, so the creature's kind of foiled. Although, just as the car pulls up, the two girls are facing the car. The brother's looking out the car window, and the creature is standing behind the girls
Yeah,
like
he doesn't
this.
see it, man. Yeah, and he
And,
doesn't see
and
it.
he doesn't see the creature. So anyway, the girls get in the car. The creature, it doesn't have prey, so it's kind of wandering through downtown Stamford. Comes across a display that has a mannequin in it, and the creature, mistaking the mannequin for a human being, tries to get to it, breaks the plate glass window, and severs its own hand. Which the next scene we see is that the hand is now in the possession of the professor, and he's doing some tests on it. Now, do you remember, Pete, what they actually say about the test? And what they find with the hand.
Refresh my memory.
And I think this goes back to your question about why these creatures would have been fleshed by the radioactivity that gets on them.
Mm.
He discovers that I guess the skeletal remains were covered in this ocean protozoa.
Oh, that's right.
That what really occurred was that when the radioactive material flooded over them, it wasn't really their flesh that was regenerated. It was the protozoa that kind of fleshed them, and they discovered this. So during the course of their discussions, their housekeeper, whose name is Eulabelle, um, and oddly enough, the actress who played Eulabelle, her first name was
You about that.
Eulabelle. Um, she comes down because she hears noises downstairs, and they're having a discussion, and she freaks out a little bit and knocks over something, and whatever she knocks over gets on the hand, and it just disappears. It like there's a flash, and it's gone. So they've mistakenly discovered a way to kill the creatures. And Pete, do you actually remember what it was that killed the creature in that, or destroyed the hand in that instance?
Yeah, it's sodium, and so they have to go look for uh, an amount of sodium that will be adequate for wiping out these creatures.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is, Pete and I did a review of the Slime People not too long ago, and the people in that film were looking for a solution to not so much kill the creatures, but to break through like a wall that had been created by the creatures, and the answer in that film was sodium. So there's something about the early '60s and having sodium be the answer that I'm not sure why that was the case. So anyway, they now know there's a way to kill these creatures. They have to find a source of enough sodium to do it, and they have to figure out where these creatures are hanging out, right? So they don't know. They do figure out that they can test the water, and because the creatures are radioactive, the water becomes radioactive. So they're checking all the bodies of water in the locale to try and figure out where these creatures are. And once they figure out where they have a chance at like basically destroying them. So there's a couple other things that are going on in the film. There's a montage where the creatures are like killing more people, so you get the sense that this situation with the horror party beach is really out of control. Eventually, Hank has to go to New York City to get sodium because nobody in their general area has it, so he drives to New York City. And while he's in New York City, the professor learns that his daughter is heading for the quarry to do some testing. Eulabelle tells him this. And the professor has one of those, why didn't I think of that moment? That's where the creatures would be. And now my daughter's going to be there by herself. And it's getting close to dark. And so basically, the professor is racing to go find his daughter at the quarry. The daughter has no idea that the creatures are there, but she figures it out because the water starts to react to the Geiger counter. Hank's speeding back from New York, and what happens? The creature starts to come out of the water. The father, trying to protect his daughter, is fighting with one of the creatures. Hank shows up with the sodium. The police show up at the same time. And what do they do with that sodium, Pete?
They just kind of lob it at them like hand grenades, and when it makes contact, they explode. Which I don't know if that really happens with sodium, but that's the solution they came up with in the film.
Yeah, it was very odd because basically the sodium that Hank gets is like this bucket full of sodium, and it looks like they're just scooping up handfuls and throwing it at the creatures like snowballs. And I have to say they're pretty deadly accurate because every time they throw a handful, they hit one of the creatures, and the creatures kind of like blow up and turn into like nothingness. Um, and basically, the creatures are all destroyed. They cut to a scene. It's the next morning. The professor's daughter's in bed, recovering. She had injured her leg trying to get away from the creature. Hank comes up to see her. Clearly, they're in love with each other now. He reports that her father, while having some burns on him is in the hospital, and he'll recover. And she's in bed, and Hank's sitting on the bed, and they have a kiss, and she says, "Oh, Hank," and it fades to black. So an interesting movie. So having said that, Pete, you gave a little bit of an idea of what you thought about the film when we first started. What are your thoughts? How would you grade this film?
I'm gonna have to give it a solid D minus. I can't go any better than that. The acting's horrible. The writing is terrible. It's not well directed. The highlight of the film is the beach party scenes where there's dancing and the band is there. Um, the creatures again are, they're relatively slow moving until close combat or close quarters are involved, and then they kind of speed up their activities. So it's not consistent, but it is what it is. It's a B movie, which of course most people realize a B movie is a movie that would be paired to a first run picture. So you get two movies for the price of one, and so it is a B movie, low budget, low production values, but worth a watch.
Yeah, I hear every bit of that completely, but I'm probably going to surprise you a little bit. I actually think this is a great little film for all of it. So every flaw that you just mentioned is 100% accurate. Um, it suffers from no money. It suffers from poor acting, somewhat poor writing. Um, but it somehow, to me anyway, and obviously this is just a personal opinion, it somehow rises above that. There are actually scenes in the movie that work. There are scenes of like when the creatures being regenerated, or the death of the girls at the slumber party, or a couple of the other. We left out a couple of the other murders. There are two drunk guys who are attacked by the creature and killed, which is kind of like an amusing scene. Um, so somehow, for all its faults, it works its kind of weird magic on me, and I really, I've seen it a bunch of times over the years. It's one of my go-to, so bad it's good movies. And watching it again in preparation for this, I was just reminded about how much I really do enjoy it. So I'm actually going to give it a B. It's yeah, you might say B for bad. It's bad. There are definitely bad things about it, but I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is a grade is probably more linked to your enjoyment of the film rather than maybe its artistic merits. So while artistically um, it doesn't have a lot to say for it, the way the film makes me feel, it felt like a B to me. So I really did enjoy that. Um, so I seem to have lost my. Sorry for a time there. I lost my screen. So, okay. So we've talked about the film. We've graded the film. I think you and I, Pete, had a discussion earlier about what we might be reviewing next. Do you have that with you? The film that we decided.
So that's a funny question because I went downstairs to the movie room before to grab my copy of the film we're going to be looking at next, and I put it down somewhere. And God, if I cannot find it, I set it down somewhere in the house, and now it's lost. But anyway, it's the Flesh Eaters is the film we should be reviewing next. Wish I had the copy of the DVD to show you, but like I said, I set it down somewhere and I cannot find it.
Yeah. Also, an early '60s. I think it's early '60s, early to mid '60s film. And interestingly, based on the title, you might think it's like a zombie movie, but it's not. But we won't say too much more about that. So yeah, tune in next time when we review The Flesh Eaters. And as always, thank you for joining us at the Late Night Double Feature Picture Show. For myself, Al, and for Pete, we thank you. If you come across this and you enjoy the content, um, please give it a like and give us a subscribe, and maybe tell your friends about it so that we can get our subscriber base up. So thanks very much, and we'll see you again next time.
All right. I still can't believe you gave that movie a B. See you guys.